from the Faculty of Defence and Strategic Studies at General Sir John Kothawala Defence University. On August 6, 1945, during World War II, specifically from 1939 to 1945, an American B-29 bomber dropped world's first deployed atomic bomb over the Japanese city of Hiroshima. The explosion immediately killed an estimated 80,000 people. Tens of thousands more would later die of radiation exposure. Hiroshima Day 2022 marks the 77th anniversary of the bomb killing. Hiroshima Day is observed on August 6th every year to promote peace politics. Dr. Sanath De Silva, the senior lecturer of the Faculty of Defence and Strategic Studies at General Sir John Kothawala Defence University, who has done his doctoral work on nuclear complexities on South Asia, is here with us today to share his valuable knowledge and thoughts about this prominent day. So, moving on to the conversation, what happened on 6th of August 1945?
Yes, Charithma, as you clearly told, there was a first nuclear bomb being dropped to the city of Hiroshima, which was considered as a military city. It was to stop the Second World War. It was done by the USA, but strategically speaking, it altered the entire strategic architecture of international relations. So that is the most significant thing that happened during that day. After that bomb blast, until now, there are no wars being fought among great states. So that purpose of United States somehow we can say have achieved to a great extent. So the nuclear weapon, the absolute weapon, was introduced to the world as a political weapon, where they stopped the entire war in 1945.
So, what are the main causes that the attack was based around?
There were many causes, very obvious causes as well as distant causes. The obvious cause is actually in the European theatre. The United States and the Allied forces had already stopped Germany making war. They killed Hitler and then they got the control of entire Europe. But the Pacific theatre was still going on with the Japanese forces. And as you know, Japanese are very determined people, and they determined to go ahead until the last soldier. So the casualty levels are going up. The American forces could not bear it, especially the Battle of Iwo Jima made so many casualties to US. And then in the European theatre, what they did was they executed an operation called Operation Overlord, where that operation stopped the war, and they planned another operation called Operation Downfall to stop the war in the Pacific theatre, to stop Japan. But they calculated if you go against Japanese in the Pacific theatre in that conventional manner, they would end up in having about few millions of casualties and deaths. So during the Potsdam conference, they decided, they warned Japan, saying that, okay, we have this absolute weapon with us. If you don't stop, the consequences will be drastic. So the reason is to stop Japanese. Unstoppable Japanese war machine couldn't be stopped otherwise. Second reason was that they had a kind of a issue with Japanese of, Pearl Harbor was bombed by the Japanese. So it's an issue of prestige also. So they wanted to show the world that if you attack United States, this will be the consequences. And then there is another reason. If Russia takes over Japan after the war, Russia will take all the control of the Pacific Ocean. So before Russia, they wanted to have the control over Japan to control the Pacific Ocean. So those are the very prominent reasons that the bomb was dropped in Hiroshima.
Yes, sir. So who were the supporters behind this attack? who were the main supporters, who were the main actors behind this attack?
Yeah, the supporters means the justification of the bomb blast came after the Potsdam conference. Basically, Russia, Stalin, and United Kingdom and United States, these three states actually justified this type of attack. And you can't say that they supported it because it's very inhuman, but they justified in terms of stopping the Japanese bomb mechanism.
Moving on to our next question. So could you please describe about the dimension of the nuclear attack taken place in Hiroshima?
There are two dimensions actually. One is the physical dimension, the other one is the psychological dimension. Japan was considered an unstoppable nation that you could not stop from, proceeding towards the progress. So they wanted to stop Japan's war machine. Actually, their samurai thinking, their traditional thinking of being a warrior couldn't have stopped if they were psychologically down. So the punitive attack that was struck on Hiroshima killed, as you said, initially 80,000, and several thousands were evaporated then, on the spot. And then after 3 days, they had another attack on Nagasaki. The yield, they call the effect or the power of the bomb called yield was about 12.5 kilotons, and that is actually was enough. That was the biggest destruction, the biggest man-made destruction ever. So psychologically, people was very, afterwards, everybody thought twice about waging war with each other. So that was the psychological effect. The physical effect is still now you can find people affected by the radiological fallout. So it's carried on by generations.
Okay, sir. So what are the damages and repercussions of the attack to Japan and to the entire world?
I think the entire world actually gained something out of it. There was no big damage, but damage to humanity is the biggest thing. To kill so many people to end the war is a pathetic situation. But to Japan had to start from the scratch. Japan had the biggest, or the most importantly, the most sophisticated war machine in history. They destroyed everything, and they had to undergo the American power and American control. Even now, Japan can't have their own armed forces. But Japan stood up from the ashes. So I think for Japan, physically, it was a very, in the history of Japan, I think there was nothing like that in history of any nation. So, but they stood up. But for the other dimension is for the world, it was a great example of what war can do to humanism.
Moving on to our final question, and to conclude our conversation, I would like to ask you for your personal perspectives about this attack, sir.
My personal perspective is actually this is a strategically very important event that took place in world history. The concept of negative peace was born because of this. The objective of war changed. The objective of war was winning before this event. But now it has become coercion or deterrence. The nations learned how to deter each other and how to balance their power with each other. And secondly, the world stopped the major warfare, the all-out total warfare with other nations, because they know that the consequences are drastic and the consequences will be very irrational, and it will destroy them as well. So that is why it is important, and also it is important for countries like Sri Lanka, who are non-nuclear states, who can be affected by such a calamity. Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much, Dr. Sanath De Silva, for giving your valuable knowledge and sharing your thoughts with us. Thank you so much.